I think today I am going to try and change the gear oil in the transmission and the rear end of the AC Chalmers D17. This is the oil fill, even says oil right on it, and to be honest with you, you guys might be surprised at how gross this oil is. So it's supposed to be a, I don't know, like maybe a greenish color, and it is definitely a brown, and this thing smells absolutely horrible. So this oil it's got a lot of moisture in it, and it has a lot of water and stuff in it. And I think what I want to try to change the oil in this thing today. However, I'm pretty sure this is going to turn into at least a 2-day job, because its stuff is melting outside, but it's definitely still kind of cool, and you know, there's a lot of metal and stuff in here to heat up. So I think I'm gonna at least pull the plug today, put a bucket underneath this thing, and then I will maybe come back to this thing tomorrow with hopefully all of the oil is out. Now, I've looked up, my brother got me for Christmas a set of, there's an operator's manual for this tractor, there's a service manual for this tractor, and there's also a parts catalog. So I've looked through both of those, and there's two conflicting numbers that come to mind with the transmission and differential in this tractor. One says 24 quarts, and the other says it is 28 quarts. So 24 quarts is 6 gallons, if I remember correctly. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. So that's 6 gallons there, and then the other one says 28, so that'd be 7 gallons. So I'm not entirely sure exactly how much transmission fluid to put in this thing, but I want to change this thing no matter what, and then we will have some nice fresh transmission fluid in this thing. So I guess let's get started. Well, you guys are looking at over $100 worth of gear oil to change the fluid in this transmission and differential. I'm at the back of the tractor. This would be the clutch side of the tractor, and there is a bolt. I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this. It's right there, and this bolt here is the one I'm going to pull. I think the engine and transmission are tied together, so all of the fluid from the transmission should flow out of here also. So I'm going to pull that plug, and it's an 1 1/8" socket. The drain bolt was on there pretty tight, but I was able to get it off with a breaker bar. You guys ready to see the nastiness that's going to come out of this tractor? And I have the bucket over top of this thing. Oh, that's pretty gross. Oh, nice. Yeah, look at that. Oh, that is so nasty. Wow. Well, it is draining, so that's good. So I'm going to let this thing drain. I had to switch buckets here. I'm pretty sure this thing now takes that's a 28 quart measurement, because this bucket is, it's not super full. However, this one is really full, and that oil looks pretty gross and it smells really bad. Let's talk a little bit about the oils that I'm going to be putting back in this tractor. So these are both gear oils. This Traveler came from Tractor Supply, and this Harvest King came from Rural King. So I know people are going to say, oh, don't mix the oils and this and that, and don't do this and don't do that. They're gear oils. They should be pretty much the same. Heck, they might even come from the same manufacturer. Even the tubs on the top both look the same. So I want to show you guys the new stuff versus the old gross gear oil that's in here. I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this oil in the new stuff looks a lot clearer and cleaner than the watercolored stuff in the old bucket. So I'm probably going to let this other thing drain, fill that other bucket for as much as it can, and then we'll go from there. Now, I also wanted to mention, when I bought this tractor, I had to put in about 3 gallons of gear oil into this thing. So I drove this thing home from where we bought it at, and I had to add about 3 gallons of gear oil to the rear end of this thing. So this tractor I think this tractor had sat out pretty much like all the other ones that we have had. They all have sat out, and that's just kind of just the way things are, I guess. So, but yeah, I'm really glad I'm doing this. And the engine oil is next on the chopping block. I bought a new filter up at Napa. That was a whopping $20 for that filter, and then another, I don't know, 20-ish for 5 quarts of oil. I think this engine will take about 6. So, another thing I wanted to mention, what is really nice about the narrow front tractor, since the front tires are literally under the tractor itself, you have plenty of room to walk around this thing, and I can easily get over to the other side. And what's really nice, I can fit a regular 5-gallon bucket up underneath this thing, and there's no clearance issues really or anything. I was hitting the drawbar, but that's really not a super big deal. And we're just about done draining here. But this is looking pretty gross. There's a lot of icky stuff in there. So I'm probably going to just let this thing drain for quite a while. I've let the gear oil pretty much drain a day. We're pretty much at a day right now. And like I said before, the transmission as well as the differential and rear end on this tractor are tied together. I pulled the dipstick in for the transmission and pulled the plug on the rear end, the plug that I showed you right in here. And there's nothing reading on the dipstick now, so I've definitely drained the oil in the transmission. So I'm going to put the plug back in, and there is a copper washer on this thing. I think you can see it there. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some pipe dope on here. I'm going to clean these threads and clean those threads on the bottom of the transmission, bottom of the rear end, and then we'll put everything back together. But this is what I'm using. It's called Thread Seal Master Plumber. Used on PVC, CPVC, metal pipe, gas lines, etc. And it's good for gas, oil, diesel, and all that. So we're going to put that on the plug, clean everything up, and then we're going to fill this thing back up again. So let's get started. Now that this gear oil has pretty much drained out the absolute, pretty much the most that it can, I had thought about putting some diesel fuel in buy like 8 gallons of diesel fuel and put inside of this tractor so that it would clean out all of the junk and stuff that'd be in the bottom of the transmission and the rear end of this thing. I probably should have pulled the shifting gear, the gear shift out of this thing again, and just kind of had a peek inside the transmission, and really I could see a lot of really what was happening inside of this thing. But I didn't pull that off, and I wish I would have. Looking back on it, it also would have made filling this thing a lot easier. So what I'm doing here is I actually was doing a check on this tractor, just kind of looking things over underneath this thing, and I happened to notice two giant bolts that were missing for the drawbar. So I have to buy some bolts. The head on them is 1.125 inches, and they're probably 2.5 inches long. So I'm going to have to buy some of those, and I'm going to try to get grade 8 if I can. They're coarse thread, so I think grade 8 stuff is usually fine thread, but that drawbar, we do use it every once in a while. This is kind of the tow tractor to tow and pull stuff, and in addition to PTO work and stuff, so this machine definitely, the drawbar definitely gets used, and the drawbar, the hole at the end of it is oblonged, probably half again as much as the original pin, probably a third to half as much. So this tractor's definitely seen a lot of use in its day. So I'm just trying to fill up the transmission and the rear end of this tractor, and I will tell you what, I forgot how difficult it was to fill this thing with gear oil from a 5-gallon bucket. I had gear oil everywhere on this tractor, all around this fill port and everything. I probably wasted a couple dollars worth of gear oil on this, just because this, you cannot fit a 5-gallon bucket below the steering wheel, and the steering wheel does not move, so you are kind of stuck there. And once the 5-gallon bucket gets below a certain point, I can kind of come in from the side, but the problem there is I almost need to stand on a ladder or something to fill this tractor, because I can't see it from one side, and I have to stand kind of awkwardly on top of this thing to try to fill the gear oil up. But it was just a nightmare to fill this thing up. Now, in those books that I showed you in the beginning, Allis-Chalmers, I was trying to figure out which fluid to put in this thing. They have like 90 weight gear oil, 80 weight gear oil, 80 W90 gear oil. They have like 75 140 gear oil. I mean, there is high trans, there's transmission fluid, so there's a number of things that I could put in here. And I looked in the manual, and unfortunately, Allis-Chalmers said to use Allis-Chalmers branded oil, and that's how you fill this thing up. So obviously Allis-Chalmers now is AGCO, and they're not in business anymore of selling oils. So what I figured out to do for the second one is I decided to fill up the second bucket about halfway-ish, somewhere around there, so that it would make this thing a lot easier to pour. It took me about 2.5 hours to pour about 8 gallons of gear oil into this transmission. It's not the nozzle on the bucket itself, it was the funnel restricting things, and the hole in the transmission is about the size of maybe a quarter, maybe a $50, something like that. So I mean, it's not super big, and the hole in the 8N is probably at least inch and a half, maybe 1 3/4, maybe 2 inches. It's a pretty decent sized hole to fill up the transmission of that tractor. And unfortunately on this one, it was pretty small, so I really had to pour kind of slow and whatnot. You can see the paper towels on the top of the tractor there flying around. That was another thing I had to deal with, was the wind. The problem with the wind is it'll blow the stream of oil around, and I only had a funnel in there about 4 or 5 inches wide, so it's really difficult pouring oil into this transmission of this tractor. And if I had to do this over again, I would probably get the biggest funnel I could find, or a super tall 2 or 3 foot tall funnel, in order to pour the gear oil into this thing. But it was pretty much a nightmare, and I wasted a decent amount of oil. I've forgotten how much of a mess it makes when you pour gear oil in the transmission and the rear end of this tractor. Alright, so the list of things I have gear oil on. Number 1, my hands. Number 2, the floor. 3, the floor pan. 4, the transmission. 5, the transmission cover. 6, the funnel on the outside. 7, I have some on this switch. 8, this lever, which actually this lever is, trace it down to here. It's this one here. And you can actually put in a belt drive to run a flat belt on this tractor. I have it on the seat, and I have it on the steering wheel. So I will tell you what, I've forgotten how much of a mess this thing makes, and I will tell you what, this is the biggest downside to this tractor is filling this thing from a 5-gallon bucket. From a 1-gallon jug, it wouldn't be that bad. But you know, when you buy it by the 5-gallon bucket, 5-gallon pail like I do, you save quite a bit of money, and that's just the way things are, I guess. But one thing I'll note here, these lids, well, not the lid, these pour spouts. So this is the Rural King one. What does this say? Harvest King. So that's Rural King. So look, see how there's nothing in there. It's just an open hole. And this is the Traveler stuff from Tractor Supply. And look at the difference. This has these little fingers that are in here, and this one doesn't. This one pours really quick and makes a big mess. And this one just has like a nice even pour to it. So I really, really like this a lot better. And actually, to be honest with you, these were pretty much the exact same price. And I think next time I'm just going to stick with the Tractor Supply one, because if I'd have used this one first instead of this one, I probably wouldn't have had such a big mess. Now, I know some people are going to say I should probably get a bigger funnel, and that is correct. The wind has been a problem, and that's just the way things go. So I'm going to pull the dipstick here, and we're going to see how full we are, or how full we aren't. Surprise, surprise! I'm back at this again, having to add more gear oil. So I think all in all, pretty much, I put about 8 gallons of gear oil into this transmission. Whenever it was at the full mark and we pulled the gear shift off, a lot of the gears were still showing, like they weren't in an oil bath or anything. So I'm glad we put in extra oil. Now that I'm pretty sure that this is pretty much full, I'm going to check the oil and make sure that this thing is full with some nice clean gear oil. And I'm going to wipe this off. See, this is what the oil is supposed to look like. Maybe a slightish yellowish, greenish color. It looks yellow on the paper towel, but it's like greenish coming out of the bottle, or out of the bucket. So we are about twice as much was where we should be. It is right there. Hopefully you guys can see that right there, and it's supposed to be down here. So the reason why I'm overfilling this, number 1, in case there's any leaks. Number 2, in the event that, if you guys have watched Chucky 2009's videos, you'll notice that his WD-45 tractor, his is, there were apparently 2 plugs or something on it, and 2 were at different heights, and he filled his tractor up to the wrong height or something and burned up a pump, or I don't really exactly remember exactly what it was. So I'm trying to eliminate that with this thing by overfilling it. This cap in here, right there, you guys can barely even see it. That cap right there is a breather cap, so if there's too much oil in this thing, all it's going to do is come out there, and I have a heck of a mess to clean up. Hope everyone enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more, and hopefully we will see you all in the next one. That right there is how you change the transmission and rear end oil in an Allis-Chalmers D17.